Hello, my name is Kenneth B. Morris Jr. I'm the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass, and I'm the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. I'm also the co-founder and president of Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. We're an abolitionist and anti-racist organization with a mission to build strong children and to end systems of exploitation and oppression. Welcome to FDFI's July 4th Remedies live webcast, sponsored by our friends at Grammarly, as well as our friends at ESL, Michelle and Eric Daniels, the Allen family, and WROC in Rochester, New York. Thank you for joining us today. Happy 4th of July from the family of Frederick Douglass. I hope you're enjoying the day, and I pray that you have a safe holiday weekend. In addition to the sponsors mentioned in the opening segment, I'd like to thank Humanities New York for supporting this program. Before we get started, I want to tell you why we're here. The mission of Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives is to build strong children and to end systems of exploitation and oppression. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we published an image created for us by the incredible artist-activist Nicholas Smith. The image carried the Douglass quote, "Disease is cured by the right use of remedies." We wanted to emphasize the acute need for Black and Brown communities to receive protective gear, as well as better access to good health care. But we also wanted to discuss the chronic health effects of racism. In his 1881 article called The Color Line, Frederick Douglass said that few evils are less accessible to force of reason or more tenacious of life and power than a long-standing prejudice. He considered racism a moral disorder that distorts perception according to its own diseased imagination. If racism is indeed a kind of disease, an epidemic in this country, then what are the remedies we have to address it? Douglass said that slavery is indeed gone, but its shadow still lingers over the country and poisons more or less the moral atmosphere of all sections of the Republic. Following the murder of Ahmaud Arbery and calls for the arrest of those responsible, we asked ourselves, what would Frederick Douglass do in response to extrajudicial murders of Black youth, women, and men in America? Using the past as a guide, we believe the first thing he would do is to write about it. That's why we decided to ask young people, if racism is a disease, what are some of the remedies you would recommend to address it? Today, you will meet those young people ages 13 to 22 who best answered that question in 500 to 800 written words. We have a lineup of very special guests for you. We're going to first talk about my great ancestors' 4th of July oration, then get to the winners of the Remedies blog contest. But before we proceed with the program, I want to introduce you to the person that made it possible for me to be here and the first to connect the legacies of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. Say hello to my mother, Nettie Washington Douglass.
Thank you, Kenny. The one question I'm always asked is, how is it that I am descended from both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington? Sometimes people will just say, I didn't know they were related. This is how it happened. My mother, Nettie Hancock Washington, was the granddaughter of Booker T. Washington, and my father, Frederick Douglass III, was the great-grandson of Frederick Douglass. My father was born in Washington, D.C., and graduated from Meharry Medical School. And in the summer of 1941, he was commissioned to the only Black Veterans Administration hospital in the country to be a surgeon. He arrived in Tuskegee in August of 1941. My mother, who was born in Tuskegee on campus in John Andrews Memorial Hospital, as was her older brother, they both grew up in California. My mother came home for a 2-week vacation, and on this particular evening in August, my father decided he was going to walk across campus and have dinner in the student dining hall, which the medical staff knew they could do to get away from hospital food and just to take a break. This particular night, he made this decision. My mother was on her way to meet family or friends for a night out, and she was running late and took a shortcut. The shortcut was across Tuskegee's campus. My dad is walking to have dinner, my mother's running to meet friends, and they literally bumped into each other. Neither one realizing that the other descended from an historical family. It was love at first sight. They were married 3 months later in Booker T. Washington's home on campus, the Oaks. I have told this story so many times, and I am still amazed at how they met. Had they not, we wouldn't be here. And here we are today. I want to send it back to Kenny, who is with our friend, David Blight.
Thanks, Mom. I am now honored to present David Blight, Yale professor and award-winning author. My family is proud to say that his last book, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom, won the 2019 Pulitzer Prize for History. I understand the Obamas, Higher Ground Productions, will be adapting your book for a Netflix film. Wow. And most importantly, you're an FDFI board member and a longtime supporter of our organization. Thank you, David, for being here.
Thank you, Ken. It's an honor.
Today is Independence Day here in the U.S. We're doing this webcast to recognize and commemorate Frederick Douglass's famous July 4th oration. I consider it to be one of the greatest speeches in American history. In a few moments, we will see and hear several young Rochester students reviving the words of Frederick Douglass with their own style and passion. They will be reciting strategically chosen excerpts from the speech that Douglass delivered in Rochester, New York, July 5th, 1852, called What to the Slave is the 4th of July. David, because of your deep familiarity with Douglass, will you help provide context for this speech at Corinthian Hall?
Yes, gladly. That speech, as you just suggested, is the rhetorical masterpiece of American abolitionism. It's one of the rhetorical masterpieces of American rhetoric. There are many reasons for that, but the historical context of the speech is the first thing people should know. It's July 1852. The Fugitive Slave Act just was passed 2 years ago at that point. There have been all sorts of fugitive slave rescues going on around the North. Douglass himself has participated in several of them through Rochester, New York. It's beginning to be a turbulent, revolutionary time around this fugitive slave issue. Furthermore, Uncle Tom's Cabin had just been published that spring, and it is taking the country and the world by storm. In fact, I would venture that a lot of those people in Corinthian Hall, the 600 folks who heard the speech that day, probably already had the characters in Uncle Tom's Cabin in their head. And yet more, this is an election year. It's 1852. The political parties in the United States are beginning to tear themselves apart over the expansion of slavery issue. The Whig Party is almost dead. The Free Soil Party has made inroads into it. The Nativist Party has made inroads into it. And the Democratic Party, which is the pro-slavery party, is also in certain ways teetering. So Douglass is very aware of this broader national political context when he agrees to the invitation to speak about the 4th of July on the 5th of July in Rochester.
We're seeing sustained protests in the streets brought on in part by George Floyd's murder. When I read my great ancestors' writings, I'm always struck by how relevant his words are to the challenges we still face today. Is there anything we can take away from the words in this speech that is relevant to the contemporary fight for justice and equality?
Well, there are 1,000 things, but first of all, and young people especially need to know this, when a huge event occurred in Douglass's life, and there's so many of them, so many of these moments that I sometimes refer to as the shock of events, whether it was something like the Fugitive Slave Act, or Fugitive Slave Rescue, or the Kansas-Nebraska Act, or the Dred Scott decision, or the secession crisis, and so on.
A lot of things.
A lot of things, but what Douglass would do is he would go to his desk and he would write it down. All of the great speeches by Douglass, including this one, we have in text form. He wrote these speeches. Now, he could be extemporaneous when he chose to be, but that 4th of July speech was very carefully crafted. In fact, there's a letter where he said he spent 3 weeks working on it. So Douglass always responded to events like this by going to words, going to the language that he could master. And then, of course, furthermore, Douglass spent his entire 50-some year public life dealing with racism, with the problem and the power of slavery in the American political system, with the tremendous crisis of the Civil War and whether it would indeed end slavery. And then once it did, the huge challenge of Reconstruction. He was a huge supporter, of course, of the three great constitutional amendments that transformed America in the wake of the war, which had everything to do with emancipation. But Douglass never gave up in fighting this idea that somehow Black people, first of all, were judged in some ways out of the polity, not citizens or indeed even inferior. There's so many great Douglass speeches that are essentially critiques of the very idea of racism itself. But then also, to his very last days, right through 1894, at 76 years old, he takes on the issue of lynching, the most horrific question of all in some ways, which has burst out in America, especially in the 1890s. And he, again, when challenged by this issue, he went to his desk, he wrote a barn burner of an analytical speech called The Lessons of the Hour, sometimes called Why is the Negro Lynched? But what it in essence is a three-part analysis of why lynching was happening in this country. And even that speech, even that desperate, terrible issue, he ended it not precisely on hope, but he ended it with once again saying that no one can destroy the natural rights tradition. No one can destroy the idea of equality before God and equality before law. There were certain principles embedded in Douglass's soul that sustained him in the face of one Jim Crowing after another, one encounter with racism after another, and one disappointment after another with the politics of race in the United States. Now, he in the end had reserves in his soul and in his mind, in his intellectual preparation over time, such that he never gave up. But last point, he also would never miss an opportunity to use an event to get people's attention and try to change society around that. When he had someone's attention, he made the most of it.
Yeah, he was brilliant, and I am honored and proud that I have his blood flowing through my veins. I know that you and I have talked before. People ask us all the time, what would Frederick Douglass do if he were here today? And it's really hard for us to say. And when people have asked me that in the past, I'll usually respond by saying, I don't know what he would say or do, but because his blood flows through my veins, I'll take some liberty. But I think with what we're seeing with the sustained protests in the streets today, and young people, you know, we spend a lot of time in schools working in K through 12 classrooms. And in talking to students, many of them have expressed anger and frustration, and some of them even rage. And, you know, we would talk to the students about Frederick Douglass because there were certainly plenty of times in his life when he was filled with rage, but he would always express himself through words. And that's why we did this Remedies blog contest. So what can young people take away, or what can they learn from this speech and from Frederick Douglass's life and work in general?
Well, again, if they read Douglass enough, and your organization, the Family Initiative, which I'm proud to be on the board of.
Yes, and we're proud to have you. You're our longest standing board member.
Well, I'm getting to be the longest standing of the other thing too, but anyway, that's fine. But you hit on it. He had the great advantage, and not everybody can do this, but he had the great advantage of being able to harness anger and rage into words.
Yeah.
1,200 pages of autobiography, thousands of speeches, hundreds and hundreds of editorials. He was a man of words. Now, not everybody can do that. Not everybody can wield the pen. We can wield our voice and we can wield our vote, which were his words too. It's the final line of My Bondage and My Freedom, the second autobiography. As long as heaven allows me to do this work, I will never forget my humble origins, and I will do this work with my voice, my pen, and my vote. I've always loved the fact that he included the vote there.
Yeah.
He would tell young people never give up. Now, that's not easy to do. And since I've just learned what you're doing here with the 4th of July speech, and you've got so many young people reading it and engaged with it and writing about it, God, if he were around today, I think he'd want to meet these young people. I think he'd want to harness them and talk with them. Actually, he'd want to learn from them. I mean, one of the things I learned in doing this biography of Douglass and living with him so long is that he was a sponge. If he met you, he'd figure out what he could learn from you. He didn't have any formal education. His education was learning from people. He'd want to meet these young people who are involved with you right now as a way of understanding their age and what they're going through. And after he probably had declared his astonishment that, man, I've been dead for 130 some years and you're still doing this?
Right. Yeah. I always wonder, if he thought about that. I'm sure that he was so busy with the work that he wasn't really thinking about how history would view him, or us looking back through the prism of history at his work. But I love that when you talk about he used his voice, his pen, and his vote, because we tell young people they need to use their voice, their pen, their keyboard, and their vote.
Yeah, there you go, their keyboard. Tickle those keys. Yeah,
tickle those keys.
Yeah, well, the pen is a metaphor now.
Right, it's definitely a metaphor. Well, David, thank you very much for joining us on this webcast. And we're a big fan of the work that you do, and we certainly appreciate all of the support that you've given us now over 13 years. So thank you.
Oh, it's an honor, Ken. I'll follow you anywhere, as you know. Thanks very much for having me on.
We've been good road buddies together, for sure.
We are, you bet.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dear friends, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the live webcast of the Frederick Douglass Family Initiative's Remedies blog contest. You are about to hear some of the most awe-inspiring young voices in our community present powerful messages of freedom and justice in the spirit of Rochester's own Frederick Douglass. The occasion for this event is the celebration of one of Douglass's most important and moving speeches, The Meaning of July 4th for the Negro, delivered on July 5th, 1852 in Rochester's Corinthian Hall. A biting and audacious commentary expressed almost 10 years before the Civil War. This speech is as relevant today as it was when Douglass delivered it. We are witnessing an historical moment brought forth by the heightened global awareness of the evils of racism and structural inequality. A critical mass of communities across the world is finally calling for justice for people of color. The words and deeds Frederick Douglass, especially those expressed in July 4th speech, continue to show us how we can answer that call. I am grateful that Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives has developed this incredible opportunity to teach our youth how they can secure their futures by looking to the lessons of history, especially Rochester's history. Thank you to everyone who is supporting this event through your participation, especially the young people who entered the contest. Enjoy today's presentations and have a happy and thoughtful Independence Day. Sincerely, Mayor Lovely A. Warren, presented by Anastasia Charlie.
Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, he who could address this audience without a quailing sensation has stronger nerve than I do. I do not remember ever to have appeared as a speaker before any assembly, more shrinking, nor with greater distrust of my ability as I do this day. A feeling has crept over me, quite unfavorable to the exercise of my limited powers of speech. The task before me is one which requires much previous thought and study for its proper performance. I know apologies of this sort are generally considered flat and unmeaning, I trust, however, that mine might not be so considered. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on your associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is, 76 years ago, the people of our country were British subjects.
Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. Their conduct was wholly unexceptionable. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn, yet they persevered. They were not meant to look back. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they didn't go mad, they became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful, but amid all the terror and affright of vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
On the 2nd day of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution, as the seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day, whose transparency is at all equal to this. It may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. You succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of the Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. Friends and citizens, I need not enter further into the causes which led to this anniversary. Many of you understand them better than I do. You can instruct me in regard to them. That is a branch of knowledge in which you feel, perhaps, a much deeper interest than your speaker. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to other gentlemen, whose claim to have been regularly descended will be less likely to be disputed than mine.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon here to speak today? What have I, or those that I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I then therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar, to express benefits and express devout gratitude from the blessing resulting from your independence to us? I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight which has brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, and I must mourn.
Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I heard the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reached them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason, most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slaves on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged in the name of liberty, which is fettered in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetrate slavery, the great sin and the shame of America. I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me, that any man whose judgment is not binded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just.
Oh, had I the ability, and could I reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. And the hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which lie is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants' brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States. At this very hour, you declare before the world and are understood by the world to declare that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet, you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country. Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies.
I have detained my audience entirely too long already. Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of a state of a nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave out where I began, with hope, while drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions. My spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other than they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time when such could be done, long-established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on in mental darkness. But a change has now come in the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It is making its pathway over and under the sea as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are its sharp agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic can be distinctly heard on the other.
The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. Africa must rise and put on her yet unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hand unto God. And the fervent aspiration of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. God speed the year of Jubilee, the wide world over, where from their gallant chains set free, the oppressed shall vitally bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny like brutes no more. That year will come, and freedom's reign, to man his plundered fights again, restored. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every clime be understood, the claim of human brotherhood. Each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend, each foe. God speed the hour, the glorious hour, when none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in a tyrant's presence cower, but all to manhood's stature tower. By equal birth, that hour will come, to each to all, and from his prison house the thrall. Go forth. Until that year, day, hour arrive, with head, heart, and hand I'll strive, to break the rod and rend the gyve, the spoiler of his prey deprive. So witness heaven, and never from my chosen post, whatever the peril or the cause, be driven.
I'm a young black man, doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but I look around and I see what's being done to my kind. Every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live. Mom, the Remedies blog contest was all about asking young people about race. But I was wondering how mothers feel when their sons and daughters are out agitating for the rights of all African Americans.
As a mom, seeing my child go out and stand up for what he believes in with a boldness, I am just so proud of him. And I would just pray that he will continue to speak out, allow his voice to be a weapon, a mechanism, a method that can be used to bring about a change. So yes, as a mom, I'm just so proud of my son. I know mothers, when we see our children going forth and doing a great work, it just makes us feel so good. And as a mom, seeing my son working actively for a change that we all desire, I'm just so thankful for it.
Because I want to change the world with my voice too, I would like to introduce you to the first winner of the Remedies blog contest in the 13 to 15-year-old age group, Eamon Capps.
Hi, I'm Eamon Capps and I live in Rochester, New York. It was an honor to submit in the Frederick Douglass Family Initiative's Remedies for Racism blog contest. I feel closer to Frederick Douglass than I did before. Some things we will need to do to eliminate racism are 1. Train officers to use their words and not their weapons. 2. We need to elect leaders who can assess the problems and find solutions to solve them. 3. We need to show racists exactly how their opinions are racially unjust and biased. 4, we need to integrate schools and neighborhoods. And 5, we need to address social and economic inequity. To confront racism, we must not only confront the racist people who have caused damage, but also the racist system that powers them. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Tasneem Gadiali and I'm 14 years old. I felt inspired to write my blog after witnessing real, tangible change brought about by citizens in my own community in Massachusetts. Just 4 days after George Floyd's death, my town passed a $125,000 bill to plan a new firing range for the police at a time where our nation was going through a moment of rethinking and reflection about how policing systems work. However, committed and educated citizens were able to sign petitions, go to protests, and move thousands of people to oppose the bill, which led it to be quickly repealed. This led me to believe that we can all affect positive change in our local governments. Let me read you an excerpt from my blog. When we are given an education about how we can get involved in our local government, paired with an awareness of racism, we can start to dismantle systemic racism piece by piece, from the bottom up. The true remedy to racism lies not in others creating policies or solutions, it lies within us. We need to educate ourselves and others, get involved, and make our voices heard. Happy Independence Day!
Hi everyone, my name is Bakari, and I'm an RIT student from DC. I'd like to thank my professor, Evelyn Brister, for informing me of this competition and encouraging me to think for as long as I've known her. Anyway, I had to write this essay because I've hoped that the world can be a better place than it has been. Part of that struggle will be inoculating people against the racist ideas that have permeated America since its founding. Here's a passage from my essay, Towards a Cure. Like coughing or sneezing, white supremacist ideas are both a symptom of racism and a vector for spreading it. The idea that black people are inherently criminal and that their presence warrants suspicion or will cause the McMichaels to suspect a jogger burglary, follow him in their car, and approach him with shotguns drawn. The idea that any black lives deemed suspicious or forfeit is what allowed them to murder Ahmaud Arbery, seemingly unaware of the injustice they just committed. It takes an exceptional amount of entitlement to think that a birdwatcher asking you to leash your dog warrants enough indignation for you to threaten him with state violence. But did Amy Cooper truly, actually think she was in the right? Or did she just think she deserved to be? Could she even tell the difference?
Hi, my name is Juvan McKnight. I'm 18 years old and I live in Rochester, New York. With all the protests going on worldwide about racial injustice, I wanted to write a blog about the practical remedies to finally eradicate this dire issue. In my blog I stated, senseless killings, like that by police officers Derek Chauvin and Garrett Rolfe, delineate that numerous white people believe, albeit unconsciously, that the lives of POCs, people of color, simply don't matter as much as white lives. Only by an interaction between people of all walks of life will this assumption finally be destroyed. Affirmative action programs must be intensified so that all people can synergistically benefit from each other's diverse experiences and realize each other's inner humanity. POCs must have POC teachers, administrators, police officers. Finally, role models that look like them to diminish their own bias against themselves. Happy 4th.
My name is Gladys Green. I'm 18 years old and I'm from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I wrote this because I believe we learn more about foreign history than our own. I believe I have found the solution, but it is not on the black community to cure racism. We can express our demands and point our oppressor in the right direction, but it is on them. When people become educated on our issues and our history, we will finally see change. When people understand the history of lynching and the terror on our communities, and they don't automatically deem those murders as suicide, we will see change. When people stop indoctrinating their children to hate black people, we will see change. When the education system decides to do its job, we will see change. I hope I'm alive to see the change come.
My name is Contessa Camacho. I am 19 years old and I am from the South Bronx. Writing this blog was important to me because it gave me a voice about a topic I have been very passionate about. While doing my associate's degree, my final paper, an inquiry project, I focused on remodeling our incarceration system and why it is problematic. This blog entry refines my ideas, recognizing the racial implications within our current model and what that means in the context of our history. I would like to highlight my favorite parts of my blog, which came from a deeper place than just research, but from my heart. Racism is a disease manifested through the incarceration system in the form of rebranded slavery. To remedy this, the incarceration system and the law itself must be reformed. The usage of private prisons in America must be abolished. No one should ever benefit financially from people committing crimes, and no one should have the financial motive to keep prisons full. Prisons must adopt anti-racism policies, preventing guards from using derogatory racial remarks and dehumanizing their prisoners. If we rehumanize our prison population, we work forward towards improving quality of life and deconstructing slavery in its newest form. Thank you. Have a happy Independence Day.
Congratulations to all of the winners. I have a feeling Frederick Douglass would be very pleased to see how you have used organized, powerful, and provocative words to express yourselves and to demand change. If anyone ever understood the true power of words, it was my great-great-grandfather. In fact, he risked his life to read and write. An incredible wealth of ideas stored in his mind were unlocked because of his mastery of both the spoken and written word. As you have heard, the remedies for racial prejudice lie in both words and actions. It is clear to me that Douglass minds are all around us. Let's fight the disease of racism together, with young people leading the way. Now, it is my pleasure to announce the grand prize winner of the Remedies blog contest, Isaac Lee. Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Isaac Lee, I'm 15 and I live in California. The main reason why I wanted to write this piece is because I want to let people know that racism can happen anywhere. And I think schools are definitely one of the more overlooked places, but it's important that we focus it on just as much as we do everything else because school is important. You know, it influences the minds of, hundreds and thousands of kids. And ultimately what we do, what we change about what we teach in these schools, it's going to impact the mindset of future generations for years to come. And I think it's important that we teach them to love, to accept, and to grow.
Congratulations, Isaac.
Congratulations to Iman, Tasneem, Gladys, Contessa, Bakari, and Giovanni. And congratulations to Isaac, whose grand prize winning blog is called A Letter to the Schools Who Taught Us Otherwise.
It was first grade. I was 7. A classmate came up to me during lunch and started chanting, "Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these." He paired the insensitive rhyme with the equally insensitive movement of his eyelids. His eyes slanted up for Chinese, down for Japanese, as if that is what made the difference. When I told the teacher what the boy did, he was let off because it was just a joke. Let me tell you, when you experience racism as a kid, it's jarring. You don't know what it is. You don't know what they've just done. All you know is that you don't belong because of something you have no control over.
Looking back, I was lucky. I grew up in a city with a majority Asian population. I didn't have to worry about not fitting in. Granted, I would be met with the occasional microaggressive comment, but overall, racism was mild. Except it wasn't. When I was 14, I learned what systemic racism was. It almost surprised me. It made sense that a country built on white supremacy would maintain it at any cost. But I guess a small part of me died when I realized that even a city like Irvine, California, glorified for its safety and diversity, could suffer the same fate.
Maybe it was the fact that only 2% of the population was black. Or perhaps it was the fact that all housing billboards had white faces. And maybe, deep down, I already knew the moment that kid came up to me. It's funny, really. Racism in school? It's not unfathomable, but it's not common either. And if you need to wonder why, then I guess it really works. It's come to a point where our education has been colonized right under our noses. And schools were built to unite children. It was a place where kids of all color could come and learn and grow. You taught us that this was the land of the free. We sang the preamble. We learned your language, we played by your rules, and it still didn't matter to you.
When I was 8, Black students made up 16% of students. It didn't matter that they also made up 34% of expulsions. We were too busy celebrating a madman's colonial explorations of genocide, or as you called it, Columbus Day.
When I was 9, you brought police officers. It didn't matter that they shoved a child to the ground. We were too busy learning about the enslavement of the Asian immigrant population, or as you taught it, the Transcontinental Railroad.
When I was 13, you told me slavery was illegal. It didn't matter that slavery lived on through the prison industrial complex system. We were too busy learning how lawmakers paved the way for legal slavery, or as you put it, the 13th Amendment. You did what you thought was best for us, and I applaud you for trying.
But there is no middle ground. When it comes to the equity of human lives, compromise isn't an option. But you didn't care. Columbus slaughtered for European expansion, you made him an honorable explorer. Slavery continued for 400 years, you said it was outlawed. Martin Luther King was a provocative protester, you rebranded him as a mild motivator.
At every step, you racially suppressed our history. You whitewashed our textbooks, glorifying the white man. Like a disease, you attacked us at our roots, conditioning us to become as ignorant as the ones who oppressed our ancestors. And, like a virus, racial prejudice is embedded in all of us.
So where do we go from here?
What can you do?
As a virus has no cure, there's no way to fully eradicate the racial prejudice we see. But we can treat the symptoms. There are a lot of fixes needed. Removal of police from institutions, college aid for underrepresented minorities, etc. Still, by far the most important is reforming the curriculum.
The world is a diverse place. Your teachings told us otherwise. So, perhaps, diversify your curriculum. Teach kids the full scope. Understand the hurt that people of color have gone through and the pain they still endure today. Teach them to check the facts, and most of all, to have an open mind and love one another with a kind heart.
You were meant to equip the next generation for the future and prepare them for the problems ahead.
And right now, this generation is solving issues of racial injustice. But no thanks to you.
You can try to ignore it,
suppress it, contain it.
But ultimately,
racial equality?
This is a lesson you need to learn.
Hello, my name is Erica Mock, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at FDFI. I want to encourage you to stay tuned for a very special song presentation from the new Douglas musical, American Prophet. It will be following our Q&A session, so you don't want to miss it. Now, let me lay out a few ground rules for our Q&A session. If you are viewing from YouTube or Facebook, of course you can ask questions directly, but if you are viewing from our FDFI website, please email us at info@fdfi.org. Now, let me introduce you to Kenneth B. Morris Jr., Nettie Washington Douglas, and Isaac Lee. Now, the first question will be for Isaac. Have you, now having good ideas and a strong voice, will you continue working to end racism?
I'm probably going to try to donate a lot of my prize money towards organizations, but I'll have to do some research about, especially on ones that help with reforming the curriculum and helping with diversifying our education system.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we'll go to the next question, and that is for Nettie. Nettie, would you ever write an autobiography like FD did?
It won't be like FD did, for sure. But yes, actually it's in the works. It's something that I have been thinking about for a very long time. And I often get questions, and often people assume I've already done one, but I figured I had to live life a little bit so I'd have something to write. But yes.
Great answer.
Thank you.
Great answer. So Ken, the third question that we have will be for you. Were the Douglas descendants in the NPR segment yesterday related to you, and how?
Yes, all of them were related to me, and I was so just thrilled to see the younger generation of Douglas descendants step out and step up. And I hope the viewers had a chance to catch that. It was an NPR segment. And so in that segment, there were 5 of the Douglas descendants. One was my nephew, and then the others were cousins. And I was just so impressed with all of them. A few of my cousins I hadn't seen since they were very small. I think the last time that I saw them was at the Frederick Douglass statue unveiling at the US Capitol in June 2013. So it was really a thrill to see them all almost grown up, not quite grown up, but to speak so eloquently and to represent the Douglass family and Frederick and Anna Murray Douglass just so wonderfully.
You could say it might be in the genes. So yes. So we will go back to Isaac. The second question for you would be, what do you want to study in college?
I'm thinking about political science, but I'm also thinking about studying education. I really want to be a history teacher, and I really hope that wherever I hope to teach, I'll be able to kind of help expand the curriculum and help, make some progress.
Well, after reading your blog, Isaac, I think you're already a teacher.
For sure.
Yes.
So this one's for Nettie. Do you have a favorite between Douglas and Washington?
Good
Not
question.
fair.
It is not a fair question.
That is not a fair question. I will say, though, I do feel closer to Frederick Douglass. And I was once asked the same question in Rochester. And I quickly said Frederick Douglass, and I thought, I wonder why I said that. Because Booker T is actually one generation closer. I'm one generation closer. But I came up with the fact that I spent my summers from the time I was 2.5 at his summer home on the Chesapeake, Highland Beach. And I was with my grandmother, who was his granddaughter-in-law. She talked about him all the time, and she had artifacts. And I think because I was around so many of his things and being in his home and the space where he would have spent a lot of time had he not died before the home was finished. So I'd have to say Frederick Douglass. If I may just go back to the question you asked, Kenny, as I have to say that his nephew is my grandson. And I am so proud of those five, my one grandson, 4 cousins. Right before doing this show, I checked, and there were close to 670,000 views.
Oh,
so we
beautiful.
are so proud of them. Thank you for letting me add that.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Ken, we're going to go back to you for a moment. And so I would say the next question is, why did FDFI move their headquarters to Rochester, New York?
In 2018, it was Frederick Douglass's bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of his birth. It's where Rochester, New York is where the Douglass family spent more than a quarter of a century. It's where Douglass published the North Star newspaper, which was the leading abolitionist voice. And in 2018, we worked with the community, a number of organizations around the bicentennial, and we erected, I can't remember exactly how many statues, I think it was 13, 14, or 15 statues of Frederick Douglass in locations all around Rochester that were significant in his life. Rochester, New York is also the place where Frederick and our great-great-great-grandmother, Anna Murray Douglass, are buried at Mount Hope Cemetery. So it was a combination of the support that we got during the bicentennial year, the support that we continue to get, and the fact that if Frederick Douglass were here today, I believe that he would be very disappointed with the racial inequity in Rochester. Our work at Frederick Douglass Family Initiative, since we were founded in 2007, we've been doing human trafficking prevention education work. And now that we're headquartered in Rochester, that work continues to racial equity. And that is obviously a very important topic, especially in the climate of this country right now and the protests that we're seeing out on the streets. And I'm really encouraged by the diversity in age of the protesters, diversity in race. And so Rochester is a place that was very important to the Douglas family. And we're very honored to have our headquarters there.
Wonderful. Isaac, I'm going to ask you one more question, and that would be, you mentioned that you would like to be a teacher, and I said, I think you kind of already are, but wondering just how you plan on going forward, especially because your blog was just so moving, how you plan on furthering that teaching of racism or anti-racism to the younger generation.
Well, I've been trying to have a strong, active social media presence, especially trying to find, sources. And I've also been doing a lot more reading up. I've been trying to educate myself even further and try to, contemplate more complex problems like, how do we solve, how do we solve racial justice, but without the prison system? So I think I'm really trying to understand the full scope of that.
Great answer. Great answer. We could keep you on all day. So I'm going to go back to Nettie one more time here. Nettie, how old were you when you found out about your lineage?
Oh, that's another good question. And I can't give you a specific age. I really don't remember. I don't remember that they sat me down and said, I have something to tell you. I just know that from a very early age, I was always doing something. Didn't always know why I was doing or what I was doing. But probably, I would say I began to understand when I was in elementary school. I did not learn that much in school. So all of my learning about my ancestors came from my mom talking about her grandfather, Booker T. And then, of course, like I said, spending my summers with my grandmother, Douglas. She talked about Frederick Douglass all the time. But I'm grateful for that. And I was going to add something of the other question that you asked me, about feeling close to Frederick Douglass. One of the other reasons too, I think, is because Frederick Douglass was, in my opinion, was an orphan. Did not have a mom or dad. He had his grandmother up until he was about 6 years old, and sometimes with his grandfather. And that maternal instinct in me, I think, really comes to the forefront when I think of him, basically an abandoned child growing up on his own. And it's just something very special about him. And I have to say, people will laugh at me, my close family and friends, but he's with us today.
Yes.
And yes, he is. And he is extremely proud and happy, very proud of the students. And I just want them to know that. I know that I'm feeling it, because I'm feeling a little something special, and you know what I'm talking about, Erica.
Yes, the wind. So do you have any final thoughts, I think, that you would like to say, Nettie?
Other than I am just extremely proud, and I want to thank everyone, FDFI, that put this together. I have the fun part of doing this, but Robert, I know Robert doesn't like me to mention his name that often, but Robert and Kenny and the staff that you have there, and you, Erica, just thank you. I've been getting texts from friends, and they think that this is an awesome program. I thank you so much. Congratulations to you, Isaac. I'm so happy to see you in person. We spoke on the phone, but the blog that you did, would never think that you are, it's a 13 or 14. I know you're in the 13 to 15 category.
15.
Yeah, unbelievable. And
but he wrote it when he was 14. You just turned 15, correct?
Well, belated birthday. Yeah, but all of the entries, congratulations to all of you. They were, haven't read them all. I will read them all. Now that my eyes have been fixed, I will be reading them all in the next couple of weeks. But yes, thank you to everybody that put this together. Congratulations. Very, very proud of all of you.
Well, I can personally say I'm honored just to be a part, and it's my true honor and privilege. And then I will throw it back to Ken for one final question. And just if you could explain, what do you think, or where do you think FDFI will go from here?
Well, we have a lot of work yet to be done for sure. We will continue our human trafficking education work and our training of educators through a program that we have called Protect. It's in partnership with 2 California-based nonprofit organizations. That program is training that's delivered online and certification for educators to be able to implement prevention, human trafficking prevention education curricula in the classroom. And we're in 30+ counties in California, we're in Utah, we're in Texas. And the way that the program was designed, it was designed to scale up. It's the most innovative, comprehensive human trafficking training program that there is. We will continue to work on legislation at the state level and at the federal level. And then we will continue our racial equity work that we've started in Rochester, New York.
And just to kind of, as a follow-up question, do you feel that there will ever be a Frederick Douglass Museum in Rochester, potentially?
We have a lot of ideas. We're not short on ideas at the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives, and we have a vision for the Frederick Douglass Center for Race and Equity. And so anybody listening to this broadcast that has any ideas or that can support us in any way, we would love to hear from you. And I will take this opportunity to thank everybody that is tuned in to watch this. And I hope that this inspires you to want to continue to learn more about Frederick Douglass. And if it's okay, I would love to introduce the next segment, which I can't wait to get to. And Frederick Douglass was born into slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland. He only saw his mother a handful of times as a baby. He didn't know who his father was. It was presumed that it was his enslaver. He had 5 brothers and sisters who were like strangers to him. However, he did have someone in his life early on who showed him love and nurturing, and that was his grandmother, Betsy. In the next segment, you're going to hear a moving song from the new musical, American Prophet, Frederick Douglass in his own words. It'll be making its world premiere at the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C. in 2021. The song is called If I Were Your Mother, and it will be sung by Marva Hicks, who will play Frederick's grandmother in the production.
If I were your mother and you were my child, I would call you close to me when you grew too wild. If you cried out in the night, whenever you grew scared, I would be there by your side to speak your name and say a prayer. If I were your mother and you were my son, we would share a lifetime of the sweetest love, of the sweetest love. Oh. If I were your father and you were my son, we would walk the fields hand in hand when the day was done. And I would share my dreams for you and promise to be there. Kindly look into your eyes and run my fingers through your hair. If I were your father and you were my son, we would share a lifetime of the sweetest love, of the sweetest love. Sweetest love. If I were your mother, if I were your mother, if I were your mother.
Hi, my name is Yolanda Renee King, and I would like to first start with congratulations to the essay winners. My grandfather once said, "Only when it's dark can you see the stars." I believe that maybe during this time it might seem dark, but we do see the stars and the shining. So keep on shining. Do not dim your light for others, and we will get to the promised land indeed. Thank you, and may God bless you.
As the nation celebrates independence today amid nationwide protests demanding systemic reform, we need the spirit and voice of Frederick Douglass now more than ever. We need the voices of young people like those you have just heard here today. I was moved by everything that I heard in this webcast. But when Gladys from Oklahoma City read an excerpt from her blog and said, "When the education system decides to do its job, we will see change." And then she said, "I hope I'm alive to see the change come." Did you catch that? She is hopeful, but we should ask ourselves why an 18-year-old should ever have to feel that way. When will true, meaningful change come? Frederick Douglass said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." What are you doing to build strong children? What are you doing to address meaningful systemic change in your community? If you're inspired by this program, please consider making a contribution to our work by texting the keyword history to 71777. If you're watching this on the FDFI.org website, please click the Give button below this video. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, the information to make a contribution is in the description section. Thank you for supporting our work, and thanks for joining us today. Please enjoy the rest of your day and have a safe holiday weekend. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Safe and happy holiday.
Happy Frederick Douglass Day.
Thank you.
Happy Frederick Douglass Day. Thank you all for joining us for this virtual curtain call.
There you go. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.